both Syriac language and script developed out of the Aramaic dialect of Edessa. This language, which was widespread in Syria and Persia, and functioned as the lingua franca of Egypt and Asia Minor as far as India, was Jesus' mother's language, tongue, and belongs to the Semitic language family. He says, thanks to the Syriac gospel harmony of Tatian of 170 and the tetragospel called Pshutta, and this is the official Bible of the Church of the East, the Pshutta, Christianity spread rapidly in Asia or Asian countries. Now, the long list of eyewitness writers and archaeological evidence, such as the inscription of Abercius, the chronology of Sextius Africanus, the pilgrimage of Egeria, and the destruction of her interesting visit and description of her interesting visit to Edessa in 382, and many more, points continuous activities of early Christian growth, tradition, and expansion inherited by the Edessan church. The reason I did not go into the doctrine of Addai, because it's long and it's worth reading by the students. They should read it. It'll give them a clear picture of what was going on. Then they can build on what I have just said to them. It's a very interesting document. But let's see what Eusebius wrote again about the story of Abgar. As he said, how he found the written evidence there, and all the history of the events of Abgar, and also he stated that he extracted that letter and extracted it from the archive and translated into the Syriac. This is very significant of this statement. And the significance of Eusebius' statement is confined to two things. One, the mention of the word early history. What early history? Obviously, the history of the Church of Edessa, Christian church in Edessa. And two, the word preserved. This leads us to suggest that the record office at Edessa may have contained other records relating to the early history of Edessa, not necessarily just the letters of Abgar to Jesus, but records that speaks of the early missions of Addai and his activities. Wouldn't you think that there was something related to that mission? What are the activities of Abgar that Eusebius is mentioning? What are these activities? Obviously, the activities of even the letters of Abgar were kept in the archives. Now let's go back to the name Addai. This is where the critics mentioned. The name Addai in Syriac was none other than Thaddeus, one of the 70 that Eusebius mentioned in his book. If we are to agree that the story of Addai, I want you to listen to this argument carefully. If we are to agree that the story of Addai and Abgar is an invention of the Christians of Edessa at a later century, we must then not ignore the possibility that the story was based on a collection of written materials, sources of oral traditions circulated for years throughout the Edessan Syriac communities and preserved in the record office at Edessa. History cannot be confined in written materials only. Archaeological remains and oral traditions oral tradition play an integral part in shaping the past history of important events that happened. Wilmrist argues that the Christian of Edessa invented Addai, Mary, and Thomas at the same time around the middle of the 3rd century to encounter the claims of the charismatic Persian visionary named Mani. I want you to study Mani. He's an important character who styled himself Apostle of Jesus Christ and named his disciple. Guess what he named his disciples? Addai, Mary, and Thomas. See, now it gives you some indication what was happening in Edessa now. If this is so, the question remains to be asked is this: what inspired Mani to use these 3 same important names of Jesus' disciples and apostle to name his own? Why specifically these 3 Eastern missionaries of Jesus? Why these 3? Why couldn't he select something, those who went, and why didn't he mention Simon? Simon was close to him in Antioch. Obviously, he was aware the 3 were the disciples who preached in Edessa and the surrounding cities, including Seleucia, Ctesiphon, centuries ago. He was aware of that. Why can't we not reverse Wilmhurst's statement and say this? Mani, a self-styled apostle of Jesus Christ, probably used the early story of Addai's mission in order to give himself a more recognized status and prominence within the Syriac-speaking Christians of the East. Why can't we do that? Perhaps that's why Mani named his disciples after the disciples of Jesus. The missionary activities of Mani, if you study it, if you read it, you see that Mani and his disciples' missionary into Rome and other areas reflects a mirror image of the apostles Addai and Mary's activities in Persia. A mirror. He must have heard it. He must have read it. That's why he is following these steps in order to arrange all his history, all his existence back into Mar Addai and Mar Mary. But then there is an important thing also. Wilmhurst, in his book, has ignored some important facts about other central characteristics of the Church of the East that support the apostolic tradition of the Church and its early teaching regarding the evangelization of the East by Addai and Mary. One of these factors is the Eucharistic liturgy of Addai and Mary of the Church of the East, which is considered to be one of the most ancient liturgies that contains texts traced back to early centuries of Christianity. Brooks, Sebastian Brooks, calls it one of the earliest, perhaps the very earliest. Now, the interesting thing about the anaphora of Mar Addai and Mar Mary is that it does not contain the words of institution, which makes it unique in its structure to almost all other liturgies of the Church of the East. Totally different. You won't find these words of institution.